welcome to day 22 of my daily vlog challenge for July. I hope you're all well. It's quite late in the day. I've had quite a busy day. I say that, I woke up at midday. I think the last few days have been catching up with me a little bit. And when I think about it, I've had a water infection, I went to Riyadh, I built a desk, I went skydiving on my table yesterday. No wonder I'm feeling a bit jaded. So I think today's been just a steady one. I have got out, which is great. And for the first time in months, I've felt able to take my cardboard recycling out. So all of that cardboard that I had from my IKEA order finally feels like it's gone. So it just feels like it's been a good day where you feel like stuff's been done. And I like those days a lot. But as I was walking home, no, I didn't walk home, I got the bus home. But as I was coming home, I went to a little food shop and was deciding stuff to get. And I thought, oh, that would be a good little topic to talk about today. So, yay, diet. Oh, it's such an emotive topic, isn't it? So I am going to talk about it because I think the changes I've made and having a chat about it is helpful, but just know that I appreciate that it's not an easy topic and there's an awful lot of opinions out there. Some of them are quite strong, so please know that from the outset that I speak from mainly experience, a bit of knowledge from the British Dietetic Association. Try and say that when you're tired. So I think there are some good advice out there. I think there are all sorts of things that work for different people, but I'm just going to talk about some of the things that I found helpful and go from there really. So I think from the outset it's quite handy to also talk about what the official guidance is. So if you go on the British, can I ever say this, Dietetic, is that better, Association, you'll find a link to chronic fatigue syndrome on there, and I'll give a link in the description below. And I have found it quite helpful. It doesn't give any revolutionary ideas, if I'm honest, and I wasn't expecting it to. Basically, it's really the advice is to just eat a balanced diet, and personally I have found things have definitely been better. I wouldn't necessarily say from a ME perspective, but I just generally, my gut feels happier, everything feels happier since I've made some changes in the last year. So I've just made a concerted effort. I think one of the things that can be really tricky with ME and any decision in any aspect of life is living intentionally. So, and that impacts diet, because I think a lot of eating healthy requires planning, and if you're always living in the now or reactionary, an example being I crave chocolate and cake and I suddenly go, oh, have I actually eaten lunch today? That's an example of having a craving or wanting something perhaps not as healthy, and when I look at it I go, oh, it's because I've not planned ahead, or I've not thought, oh, perhaps I should have some actual lunch. As an example, I think those kind of things happen quite often. Life just gets carried away, it goes away, it comes, it goes, it just happens, and before you know it, it's tea time, you're like, oh, what have I actually done today? Have I even eaten properly? It just, I find that is a challenge, and I'm not entirely sure where my train of thought was going there, so I might have to watch this again and think, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so I was literally just saying about how planning is helpful in living intentionally, and I definitely have found that really helpful, and it stops me from having to eat so many ready meals. But even things like choosing convenience foods that are a little bit better has really helped this last year. So I try and avoid overly processed foods. I definitely have found it just really lovely not having so many ready meals, and I'm not legalistic about it. I generally will have at least one shop bought ready meal in the freezer just for those days where it just hasn't, gone right, or I've not planned, or something's not quite gone right. I do have them, but I try and pick some that convenience foods that don't have as many lists of ingredients, or at least just fit in within a healthier end of the spectrum, because it is a bit of a spectrum, isn't it? Let's face it. So I definitely find that helpful, and even on frozen foods. So I've got some mashed potato in the freezer. I could make mashed potato and freeze it, and I have done that in the past. But it is quite handy having this, the packets that you get from the supermarket. Now from one shop, and I can't remember which one it was, they list the ingredients, and it just had quite a bit, modified this, modified that, and it had quite a long list of ingredients, whereas the one that I found from Tesco's, when you look at the ingredients, it just has potato, salt, pepper, and condensed butter, milk. So it is processed, that, especially the dairy element, but it doesn't have any additional emulsifiers or anything in it that you need on the ingredients. So I think my point is there that not all convenience foods and ready meals are on the same par. So even things like, I will generally have a bit of a fake away on a Friday when I'm having my Zoom call with friends, and I normally will just get a really cheap 90p pizza from the supermarket, and in the ingredients, they're not great, but in terms of calories, compared to other pizzas, and say getting a Domino's in, it's a lot less. So I feel like, actually, again, it's not a healthy food, but I'm trying to at least think about, okay, well, what can I do to at least put it towards the lesser end of have a good detrimental impact on my health. And if I'm choosing a pizza at night, I might make sure I've got something with loads of vegetables and a salad at lunchtime. Balance is something that I think has really been important, and I think I like that about the British Dietetic Association guidance. It's not saying don't have anything naughty, I don't think, but ultra processed food, I do just think, for me personally, cutting as much of that out as possible has made a big difference, and also increasing variety. So I just think having a really varied diet is I find really beneficial. I think from an overarching perspective, for me, I really saw a breakthrough in diet when I'm losing the will to talk. Was when I started focusing on what I could eat and what I wanted to eat, and adding good things in rather than taking bad things out. And an example being, well, I've come home from somewhere, maybe when I was working, and I would do a shift, and I'd come home and I want to just eat a massive bit of cake. So rather than going, okay, well, I'm not going to have cake, and then have this massive internal battle in my head, I go, well, clearly I want something sweet and naughty. So therefore, something like, I don't know, I used to have a packet of Celebrations, and I'll just have one or two of those, and then I think, okay, well, what am I going to have that's actually, what do I actually need? And then I'd have like a baked potato and maybe some tuna or something with it. I'm basically saying, instead of going, no, I'm not going to have that, I would reduce that, so I'd have something small of that food that I was craving, that high salt, high sugar content, and then I'd go and have something that was actually going to benefit my body. And I felt that was really helpful, because it just took the battle out of my head. And just focusing on the positive of what am I including into my diet, because the reality is I am going to get full up, and if I eat a load of cake, that's going to fill me up. If I eat a massive salad with chicken and loads of leaves, of onions, maybe some croutons, just a few, or just a bit of pasta or rice or whatever. You add all that healthy stuff in, and I just found that I didn't have the room in my stomach for the processed stuff. So almost like I was like, I'm stuffing my body full of good stuff, so then out goes the bad stuff on my diet. And I just found that a lot more positive rather than just trying to restrict all the time. It was more about building in rather than taking out, is basically my take home comment. If ever there was a take home message from this, I think it's, if you are looking to make changes, having the positivity is way better, I think, and just accepting that your calorie count going in and out is one of the strongest things I find. So I've also this year worked out that on a day that I'm really not doing anything at all, or even maybe a week where I'm having weeks I'm not doing much at all, I would try and reduce my calorie intake, because I realised actually I'm not as active during a particularly active flare-up. Active, you know what I mean? A flare-up that's particularly bad that I had in the winter. I probably don't need as much calories, and therefore having smaller portions but maybe more of them, and making life still interesting, and not saying, okay, well, I'm just going to have one big meal or two big meals with the calories that I need for the day, but saying, okay, well, if I'm awake during the day, I can have a really small amount of variety but have the same calorie count that I would need. So I found that quite helpful, working out what my calorie requirements are, and I realised in the last few months that I probably am eating a few too. I don't need as many as I do, but as I've got more active, I might want to start thinking about putting some in, and obviously thinking about what that looks like. But the reality is it can get quite tricky to you can end up microanalyzing, and I'm not entirely sure that's helpful when you've got ME, to be microanalyzing everything at once. So I might have a season where I think, okay, for the next 2 weeks I'm going to focus on my exercise and just keep an eye on that and make sure that I'm utilising the energy that I have for that. And then I might think, okay, now's the time to focus a bit more on my diet and what's going in. And so I think, I don't know if that's been helpful at all, but I just find that I've never found any restrictive diet has been helpful. So the keto diet, there's one beginning with C that's quite popular. I'll put that on the screen for you. Never found that. Reducing gluten. The weird thing is that I think my body just tells me what I need. When I'm craving chocolate, I actually think it's because I crave magnesium. I feel like I lack magnesium because I'm on omeprazole, and nobody tells you this when you start taking it. It's only when you look at the instructions, the leaflet, it says, oh, if you're on this a long time, take magnesium. And one of the things that I find is that I crave chocolate. And so rather than beating myself up over craving chocolate, I'm going, okay, well, what's this telling me? And then I increase, I was thinking, oh, maybe I should take magnesium supplement, and within a couple of weeks my cravings for chocolate is gone. So it's interesting. I think it's cravings and things can be quite interesting, and it's quite helpful to listen to what your body might be saying about that. And the only other specific ME thing I find is with IBS. I only really get it at the beginning of a flare-up, but it is quite dynamic and it's not pleasant. But I do find the FODMAP diet, that's the only real diet that I would follow to do with the ME that I've had. And so, yeah, I think that's definitely something that I found really helpful, and it does nip it in the bud. I find if I only need to have the FODMAP diet probably for about 4 days, if that, and gradually introduce foods and then have the variety again, because I've been on quite a few antibiotics treatments over the last year, with the tick bite, with the water infections, etc, etc. I just try and make sure, again, the variety, making sure that my gut's having to deal with a lot of different type of foods. So there's different types of microbes in my stomach, I think that's really helpful. Obviously, you've got the bio yogurt stuff. I do tend to have those sometimes, but I don't find them particularly revolutionary. I think they're good as a way of starting things up, maybe after you've had antibiotics or while you're having antibiotics, but generally I just try and focus on having a variety of things. What else can I say? Oh, in terms of actually hiking and stuff, so one thing that I find and I need to get better at is I need to eat more when I'm hiking, and what tends to happen is, like I would at home, I can easily forget to eat, and so I think what happens is I get to a point where I cannot stomach food anymore because I've gone beyond, and my body is just going into a bit of emergency situation, if that makes any kind of sense. So I find if I don't have a snack throughout my walk from the beginning, I find after about an hour or two, it's almost like my body's then fighting. And I've learned that the last year, and I'm trying to tweak exactly what I eat when I'm hiking. I say hiking very loosely, but when I'm out and about and doing wild camping on trips and whatever, I do find I things like flapjack or having something that's a bit more substantial. I mean, when I was on my Hereford trip and I went up to the Worcestershire Beacon, I just had a flump, just like those marshmallow things, and it did the trick. But I also discovered I quite like a carrot, so I think that's a far better option. It definitely warrants some thought. I think if you're active, especially with ME and things, I feel like something that I'm learning and getting better at is knowing exactly what works. And I think the reality is with ME, I find that it really impacts your ability to make energy out of food. So I feel like your metabolism changes. So how I was when I was younger, and it's not just an age thing, I definitely noticed a change over a period of a few months where what I was eating and how I was refueling and feeling that refreshment from either food or energy or whatever definitely changed. And I feel like there is definitely an issue in my body with producing energy from food. Respiration, basically. I wouldn't be surprised if there's increasing research that suggests that one of the issues with ME is to do with how your body turns food into energy, or diet intake into energy. Because I think that's sometimes what happens is I might be walking down the road and then I suddenly it's like I've run out of oomph and I just suddenly slump to the floor. And that's not necessarily, that feels like it's more of my body's just gradually not producing enough energy from what I've got in. So that is a common thing for me, certainly. I'm trying to think what else. If I can find a research paper, I will try and include that, because I'm sure I've read something somewhere and that respiration, the actual function of making energy, that there's some suggestion. And I don't know, there's something called gene expression, so sometimes it's not that there's genetic changes, but that certain things, environmental or perhaps other things, changes the way that your body acts at a molecular level, if that makes sense. I'm not talking gibberish, but I know that my wording could be, I think the words that I'm using might be slightly wrong. But right at the heart of how you make energy basically might be impacted, and I would say my experience of that is very true, rather than just a regulatory thing, because I think a lot of people talk about ME as a multi-system regulatory thing, and I think that's definitely true. I'm not going to dispute that. I just think for me the overarching thing is just the ability to produce energy. I think it just happens that I feel quite dysregulated, but even when I feel like with the treatment that I've had, and having that feeling that your system is being better regulated, and that's a whole other topic. And there's a word for it. I'll put it on the screen because there is a word for it, and I'm not very good at technical terms. Even with that sorted, I do just feel the underlying issue isn't resolved. And diet comes into that because at the end of the day, that's how we get our energy from. So I do like scrolling right back to what I did talk about at the beginning. I do like what the British Dietetic Society say about starchy foods. I think, as much as I don't like that because of potentially weight, but the low GI foods, wholemeal stuff, that's definitely been helpful for me, going wholemeal, so that I'm processing those foods more slowly. But I do think that because it is such a energy dense food, I do find that quite helpful, because, and it would make sense for me because of the fact that I need something that really does encourage me to produce energy. I'm not sure if that even makes any kind of sense. I know this is going to be a long waffle. It's not, it's very difficult to be coherent, especially when you're just talking to a camera. I will do a proper video in the next few months about it, with a full-on bit of a presentation and of all the things that I've learned. But for now, that's the best you're going to get from me, unfortunately. So summary, do read that link on the British Dietetic Association. There are diets you can try. There isn't any evidence in that, but there are people that will swear by diets that have got them through. Personally, I've not found a breakthrough, but I have found just eating a healthy, balanced diet and including things in rather than excluding things out. And I'm very lucky, really, because I do love a good salad. I really love a good salad. I actually really enjoy healthy food apart from fruit. Another thing, actually, to leave you all with, I struggle with taste, food, sensitivities, sensory overload, basically. So a lot of fruit, you're not going to get me to eat fruit willingly. So that's quite challenging, but I still manage to get variety in. If you have sensitivities to food, I feel your pain, because it's not easy when you go around someone's house and you're like, just exclude fruit altogether and we'll be good. I just find textures really tricky to deal with. So yes, top tip, be kind to yourself. I think beating yourself up is never helpful, really. And I think I will leave it there, and I will see you tomorrow, hopefully feeling a bit more coherent and able to focus my thoughts into an organised manner.